Hello, friends. The following is a conversation with Kevin Palmieri. Kevin is a podcaster and developer of Next Level University. He also has developed his own concept of what he calls hyperconsciousness, which is a form of brutal honesty. This episode was all about Kevin's journey from leaving a stable, secure job into pursuing his career of passion and podcasting. So it was a very fascinating journey and so relevant to people nowadays who very often find themselves trapped in the rat race. Kevin has left the rat race and has pursued his own thing in a very extreme way. This was a very interesting conversation, and I hope you enjoy it. Guys, to support the podcast, you can book a session with me, link in the description, as well as sending Kevin some love. Additionally, folks, be sure that you like and subscribe and share and follow and leave a 5-star review if you can, and comment what your favorite part of this podcast was. I'm very curious to hear from you and what you guys think. So, enjoy the episode. Kevin Palmieri, how you doing, man?
I am living the dream, and I'm excited to chat. You and I had a really good podcast pre-call, which seems like 6 months ago. It was probably like 2 weeks ago, but yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to see where we go with the depths of our conversation today.
Yeah, first of all, can you just tell me about what you're doing these days?
Yeah, today I am a podcaster, speaker, coach, entrepreneur, and we do an episode every single day on holistic self-improvement. So the majority of the time spent for me is sitting in this chair, in front of this camera, in front of this microphone, trying to pour into the lives of others, because I wish I had someone to pour into my life much earlier on, because I think my life would have ended up differently. So that's the majority of what I do today.
I love that so much, by the
I
way.
appreciate it.
And like that, yeah, that attitude of somebody was there or somebody wasn't there for you rather, and then being able to be there for that person. And I know for myself, like as a teenager, being lost and confused about the world, not knowing what the heck's going on, having a resource like YouTube where I was able to like watch these people who gave me guidance when I didn't feel like I had that in my community, in the way that I needed. You know, it was so valuable and so important. So I feel like it's so awesome that you're doing that. And I feel like we vibe on that level. Can you tell me about what holistic healing is exactly? Like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, holistic self-improvement means that you don't just go all in on making a boatload of money. You don't just go all in on looking really good on the beach. And you don't just go
Mm,
all in on spending all the time you have with the people that you love. For me, when I'm the most fulfilled, it's when I'm growing in all three buckets.
mm,
Because I've been a bodybuilder who is in unbelievably good shape, but my mental health was in the toilet. I don't want that. I've been financially successful, but very lonely and very heartbroken. I don't want that. I've been deeply in what I thought was love at the time, and I spent so much time with my partner that all of my friendships died. And
mm.
I've kind of learned that I have a guilty history of going all in on one thing, getting a lot of results in that one thing, and then ending up wildly unfulfilled. Our goal is to
Mm.
help people avoid that, because my business partner and I have experienced that a lot. So holistic means well-rounded life, love, health, and wealth. All
Right.
four of those.
I love that so much. And it's like, can you talk about a little bit what you do to help brown people out?
Yeah, it's a great question. We tend to attract emotionally driven humans to our
Mm,
podcast and our business. And oftentimes they are really good at emotional intelligence. They are really tapped into their intuition, and they're really character driven. But what they might be lacking is structure, consistency, discipline, and biggest of all, strategy. So we will help them be more strategic. If somebody
mhm,
comes to us and they're really intelligent and they're really dialed in and they have all these systems, oftentimes it's the vulnerability, it's the emotional intelligence, it's the intuition, it's the self-worth that they need help with. So it really is that
mm,
thought of, okay, what is this person already naturally really good at? What are some of their common weaknesses that we can help them round out, as you said? And then we really try to pour into that. Group coaching, for example, we literally have a session on health. We have a session on wealth where we talk about money and how to make it and all that. We have a session on love, which is on relationships. So it really is, every single one of those is catered to, if you're struggling here, we're going to help you get to the next level. And then next week, it'll be a different pillar of what we talk about.
Dude, that's so beautiful. I mean, is 1 week long enough to talk about each topic?
So it's technically 2, because we do
Mm,
calls every other week. So technically it's probably long enough, but it really depends, right? Because we could go into mental health for a long amount of time. But the goal is, we've learned that we tend to overwhelm people. It's very easy for
mm.
us to just go way too deep, way too quick, and scare people away. So it seems to be the sweet spot for us now. Yeah.
That's awesome. Can you talk to me about your journey with this, like how you got into this and what was that experience like for you?
Yeah. I was someone who knew I didn't want to go to college. So after high school, I just started working odd jobs. I pumped gas at a gas station. I cleaned floors and bathrooms at a hospital. I was a truck driver. I was a forklift operator, on-call firefighter for a very short amount of time. I did many things in my young career. But eventually I got a job in an industry that was called weatherization. And
Hmm.
all that means is we would go into large buildings, and it was our job to make those buildings more energy efficient. So
Hmm.
we'd work in the attics, we'd work on the windows, we'd work on the doors, all this stuff. I assumed that when I got this job, I was going to be the most happy, fulfilled, successful person ever, because I was making anywhere from $60 to $120 an hour. For
Wow.
me, and still to this day, I mean, that's really good money, but I didn't have a college degree, and I never expected to make that kind of money. My assumption was, I'm going to feel successful, I'm going to feel fulfilled, self-worth, self-belief, I'll have all that stuff. That was not the case. I realized pretty quickly that was not the case. So I spent one of the years I worked at that company, for that year I spent 10 months living on the road, because a lot of our contracts were in other states, and I was just living in hotels for the entire year pretty much.
Mm.
Got to the end of the year, opened up my final pay stub of the year, and I made $100,000 at 26 with no college degree, expecting to feel this overjoyed emotion of
Mm.
success and self-worth and all that. That didn't come. I didn't get that. I realized that for most of my life, I had lived unconsciously. The opposite of unconscious is hyperconscious. So in 2017, I started a podcast called the Hyperconscious Podcast. And for me, it was, I want to know as much about myself as humanly possible, because I feel like that's probably the missing link for me, is I have no idea who I am and what runs me and why I do what I do.
Hmm.
Fell in love with podcasting. As you know, in the beginning, there's not a line out the door of people giving you money for your podcast, right? So I had to keep doing the work thing, and my mental health started to take a turn, and I was anxious and I was depressed, and every time I would pack my bag to leave, I would just be homesick. And eventually it got to the point where I was traveling for work. I was 6 hours
Hmm.
away from home. My alarm clock went off at 6 in the morning. I sat up. I slid to the edge of the bed. I was lacing up my work boots. And that morning I was having these really dark thoughts. And I just felt like I was stuck. I felt like I was trapped. I felt like this job was the only thing I'd ever be able to do, because I couldn't start over. I felt like a fraud because I got lucky to get this job. And that morning I had a conversation with myself where I said, well, if I was just to end my life, I would take all these problems with me. I wouldn't have to worry about any of this crap anymore. Luckily, I have very positive people in my life, and I reached out to one of them, and he's now my business partner and the co-host. And he talked me off the ledge, so to speak. And then I ended up leaving my job 3 or 4 months later, and then beginning the journey of being a very broke entrepreneur for the next several years, trying to figure this out. But one of the weird things that happened is, when I left my job, my depression went away. I am
Hmm.
not kidding. It was like night and day. My anxiety got worse,
Hmm.
far worse. I had never had panic attacks until I left my job, and that started. But then,
Wow. Okay.
yeah, it was brutal. But I was also the most fulfilled I'd ever been. So it was this really weird time in my life where a lot was happening, but it also felt like nothing was happening.
Hmm. Okay, fascinating. I mean, there's so much to dive into. I'm curious. First of all, just about the panic attacks. Were they random or were they related to money? Like, now, where are you gonna get your next meal from?
Yeah, that was a big piece of it. I think everybody says get out of your comfort zone.
Mhm.
Nobody tells you how far to get outside your comfort zone. I went
Yeah.
too far outside of my comfort zone. And yeah, I am a very certainty driven human. I had no certainty. we were putting so many things on credit cards. We were traveling to events to try to learn. I was terrified of travel. I was terrified of planes. I was terrified of meeting new people. So I essentially went from living a life of a lot of certainty to a life of no certainty from the financial and success standpoint. And I think it broke something in me. And I remember I was, several times laying on the floor thinking I was going to die because I didn't know what an anxiety panic attack was. So, I think it was that. It was lack of certainty, and it was just being overwhelmed and under pressure too fast at too high of a rate, I would say.
That's incredible, and that's so wise, and that's often what happens. And that's often what anxiety is too. It's that uncertainty and being there. And it sounds like you were pushed so far into the edge. It was manifesting in these horrible panic attacks.
Unfortunately, yeah. Yeah, I had a conversation with myself recently where I said, if I wasn't an entrepreneur, I don't think I would have anxiety like I do. I genuinely don't think I would, because I never would have gotten so far outside of my comfort zone. Now, here's the good thing. Now I'm at a level where it takes a lot to affect me, because I've just been under the pressure of this for long enough. But there was a time in between where I couldn't get out of bed. I used to have asthma, so I thought I was having asthma attacks. So I went and got an inhaler. I thought that was going to fix it. And then that led me on mindfulness and breath work and meditation. So there was definitely positives to it. But at the time, I thought I was broken, and I thought there was something horribly wrong.
Wow, that's so wild. So, I mean, did the mindfulness and breath work help with the anxiety and panic attacks? Like, how are you now with that?
Honestly, no, not really.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it didn't really help me. Meditation's great, and I'm all for it. For me, it wasn't because I wasn't mindful enough. It's because I was way too far outside of my comfort zone. I think that's really what it was. Today, from time to time, I get anxious. My anxiety shows up as tightness in my throat. That's what anxiety feels like to me. Usually I'm aware of it, and then I can just talk to myself. Kev, you're fine. You're getting full breaths. Your stomach is going up and down. You're able to swallow. You're okay. And then usually if I do that for long enough, 5-10 minutes, it usually subsides, and then I'm pretty much back to normal. But yeah, that took years to get to that kind of understanding and trying to logic my way out of, my unconscious anxiety that I'm dealing with, subconscious.
I want to talk about hyper consciousness, and I also want to talk about your journey more, like that transition from going from this quote unquote secure job, although you were feeling miserable, to suddenly having that depression go away overnight and feeling fulfilled for the first time. Like, what was that like building this podcast, and what other challenges were you facing in the beginning?
Man, it's hard to explain, because there was a time in the beginning, it was like a fun, convenient hobby that I wanted to do forever. Like, this podcast thing is cool. I like it. It's like sexy. It's cool. It's different. I want to do it. When I really started to feel like it could be something and I was on the right path more than anything, I was home one day. I moved in with my best friend so we could chase our dreams together and I could save money. And I was home alone one day. He was out doing something. And I was walking around the kitchen, and I remember thinking to myself, I am the brokest maybe I've ever been as an adult, for sure.
No.
I have no prospects of love. I am wildly and embarrassingly single, and I'm the least successful I've ever been. And I probably look like a giant loser. But for the first time ever, I was proud of what I was doing in the world. And it was this very weird thing where I lost all of the external results I had, but I started to build the internal stuff and understand the internal stuff. And that really became me becoming more and more and more hyper-conscious. So in the very beginning, honestly, I probably didn't take it as seriously as I should have. I didn't know how much I was going to have to work. I didn't know what I was going to have to learn. In the beginning, it was kind of just deep conversations with my business partner. We do 1 episode a week. We go to the gym together and spend like 2.5 hours at the gym every day. And we just talk about growth and life. And it was very fun in the beginning. It was very, very much a hobby. It was very much a hobby that we wanted to try to do forever. And that was it. That was it in the very beginning. The transition was abrupt. I left my job. And then that was like the day I left my job was the day I was going all in on the podcast. So then it became, okay, cool. I have to figure out more about this podcasting thing and speaking things. I'm going to start tracking habits and all this stuff. It was very abrupt, probably too abrupt, honestly.
What would have been a more balanced approach to it?
Creating some level of intellectual runway that says, Kev, you're going to leave your job at this point, 6 months from today or 8 months or 9 months from today. And in the meantime, you're going to try to squirrel away as much money as humanly possible. And you're going to work on what it's like to have time freedom, because time freedom is not what a lot of people think it is. When you have time freedom, you have to have real discipline. And I didn't really have that. So it would have been a more honest conversation with self of, Kev, when this job goes away, so doesn't all of your money. And I know you're going to want to hang out and you're going to want to smoke weed and play Call of Duty. And sure, you want to do that on the weekends? Fine. That's fine. You could do that. But if you do not take this seriously, you are going to end up a casualty of being an entrepreneur. And I just wish I could have known that in the beginning, but that's kind of the way it works, right? You don't know what you don't know until you know what you don't know.
That's part of life. You kind of reminded me of, the book The Alchemist?
I do.
Yeah, so in, I guess it's a minor spoiler alert, but towards the beginning of the book, he gets robbed of all of his earnings, like all of his gold, because he kind of got duped. And I don't know, you kind of, in that moment when you described you being in that kitchen, realizing like you're at the lowest of the low point you've ever been, and then you had to build up from there. That like just reminded me of that exact moment for like Santiago, where it's like he had worked so hard, had all these sheep, like sold it, had money, and then got robbed, and it's like he's starting at this rock bottom point.
It's an invaluable lesson. It was because I am not supposed to be successful. Nobody would have bet on me being at any level of successful, especially myself, including myself. So it almost was, I was very unsuccessful for the first 24 years of my life. 25, 26, and 27, I was super successful, but I didn't do any of the internal work. Then I lost all of the external success and I went purely internal. And now I'm at a place where I'm the most externally and internally successful. But I don't think that would have happened if I didn't lose it. No way. I wouldn't have had the necessity. I wouldn't have had the pain. I wouldn't have had the reason to seek out the uncomfortable truths that I've been seeking out for the last 7 years.
Fascinating, yeah. And that's exactly what happens to Santiago. So it's so cool seeing you on that like hero's journey. I mean, can you talk to me about what your business is now? And also, maybe I want to backtrack a little bit. I know that you had some type of struggle with addiction. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah. Porn addiction? Is that what you and I talked about behind the scenes?
Did was it porn addiction or was it alcohol addiction?
No,
I don't remember.
It's never been alcohol. It has been porn, though.
Oh, it's never been alcohol.
Yeah, no, it's been porn for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, sure, we can talk about it.
I feel like it's one of those things that a lot of people struggle with, but most people don't want to talk about because it's like the behind the scenes thing. So when I was young, I've connected this, right? I've tried to do a lot of work to connect this. When I was young, we had one of those black boxes. And for those who don't know what a black box is, illegal, I'm guessing, but you got all of the channels for free. So I was exposed to porn when I was like 6 years old. I remember watching it. After everybody went to bed, I remember watching it on the TV when I was like 6. And I think that kicked off kind of this weird relationship with pornography and nudity and whatever it is. And then when I was in my mid-teens, I had already been using porn for I don't even know how long, at least 5 years. I probably started when I was like 10 or 11. Later in life, it started to lead to sexual dysfunctions when I was in relationships. And again, that's kind of a theme for me. The pain eventually got great enough where I literally couldn't have intercourse with my partner because I had porn-induced erectile dysfunction. Realized this is a thing that I'm dealing with. I went and tried to get as much information as humanly possible about porn and what it does to your brain and is it really bad and what's going on. And then ultimately I quit. I said, look,
Mm.
I can't do this anymore. This is really affecting my life. And I'm terrified that it's going to continue to affect my life. So for me, I think it all started in childhood, having access to it long before my brain was capable of processing. And then that just became kind of a groove that I fell into. And I would definitely say it was an addiction. I mean, I wanted to stop for years and years and years. I just never could stick to it, unfortunately.
So what were the things that helped you really stick to it and put it down?
Public accountability. When I started talking about it, like even right now, when I talk about it, it further locks in the fact that I am no longer the type of person that consumes porn. It became part of my identity. So public accountability has been huge for me. I always remind myself of the pain associated with it. The pain associated with it is far greater than the momentary pieces of pleasure I will get. And I always try to remind myself of that with stuff too. Am I doing this next behavior for a 15-second shot of dopamine? Because if I am, it might not be the best thing for me. So it's constantly reminding myself and reflecting on the pain that came from it and why I stopped in the first place. And I feel like if I did go back, I would have to admit it. I would have to admit it to the podcast community. I would have to talk about it. I wouldn't be able to talk about it in this way. I'd have to say, well, I used to struggle and then I kind of overcame it and now I'm struggling with it again. Because I want to be as authentic and as transparent as possible because I believe that could help someone. So yeah, it's really those three things. I just try to be very honest with myself and I want to be very authentic. It's important for me to be authentic.
That's so awesome. And I feel like it's a necessary ingredient for popping off these days.
It helps.
Yeah, it helps. So can you talk to me about your business and like what does it mean to be hyper-conscious and the podcasting game and all that?
The definition of hyperconscious in the dictionary, which I was upset that it was in the dictionary because I wanted to get it in the dictionary. How naive was I? It is acutely aware. Acutely aware means you understand yourself. It means to me, you understand yourself at the deepest level. You know what runs you. You know what offends you. You know what triggers you. And then you know the layers below it. When you get triggered, you know why. And then you know how to stop yourself from being triggered or at least explore that. And you ultimately become more of the captain of your life because you're in control of how you think, what you say, how you act, what you do, what you don't do, and all of that. So ultimately, the business is a podcast episode every single day on holistic self-improvement. 7 days a week, holidays, doesn't matter. Every day, 7 days a week. Under that, there's a bunch of other stuff. We have free courses. We have a free Facebook group. We do free monthly meetups every single month where we dive deep into a topic, relationships, health, wealth, whatever it is. We have group coaching. We've done 15 sessions of 10 people. So we've graduated 150 some odd people from our group coaching. We do one-on-one coaching. Alan my business partner does more of that with the community than I do. But he coaches business owners. He coaches people who want to start businesses or just somebody who wants to be more aware and more hyper-conscious. Now I coach dozens and dozens of podcasters. We have a podcast production company. We have a social media company. So a lot of it has just come from people would ask us, well, how did you learn so much about yourself? And then it got to the point where they said, I'd like help with that. And that became a piece of the business. People would ask me how to help with their podcast, and that became a piece of the business. So very honestly and very transparently, a lot of the things that I do today, I never anticipated doing. It was just based on, I learned how to do it. We figured out a way to systematize it. And then people started asking us for help. And now that's very much become the business. For us, the podcast it's a free value add. We don't do sponsorships. We don't do paid ads. We don't do affiliates. We don't do any of that. Anything we talk about is our stuff because if you're going to work with us, I really would like to add value to your life at a deeper level. And that's kind of one of our philosophies.
What was the process though from just starting it as a hobby till it eventually becomes monetized and it's turning into a business?
Yeah, I mean, it was the first 2 years, it was suffer, work on your character, So I never expected to attract the audience that we attracted. Our strategy in the beginning was when somebody shares anything that we do on social media, let's say they share a podcast clip or whatever it is, I would message them on Instagram and I would just say, hey, Brittany, thank you so much for the share. I appreciate it. I would love to get to know you better and what you're going through and what you're dealing with so we could produce better content. This is my phone number. Here is my direct phone number. Are you open to hopping on a call or a FaceTime in the next couple weeks?
Really interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Extremely unscalable and probably not the best way to do it now because of anonymity. And now a bunch of people have my phone number, but it is what it is. And I would just hop on and just chat with them. What's your relationship like? What was your childhood like? What's your biggest struggle? What's your biggest success? I just want to know all about you so I can produce the best content possible. What we found is most of our listeners were women. I'm a tattooed bodybuilder who loves mixed martial arts and violence. I didn't expect that. I thought we were going to be a bodybuilding bro motivation podcast kind of.
Interesting. Okay.
That was kind of the thought. So the first couple of years, it was, look, we're going to learn how to speak to an audience that we have never really spoken to. And I want to be the most positive, balanced male human I can be. I don't want to be toxic. I don't want to be like a lot of the other toxic self-improvement guys. I want to be balanced. I want to be healthy. I want to be safe. I want to be reliable. I want to be vulnerable. So that was the very, very beginning in terms of the mindset and the inner stuff. The external stuff was I started tracking habits. So I told my business partner, I said, I got to learn more. I got to grow more. I don't know what to do. So I started tracking 5 habits every single day. It would be every day I'd track my bank account. Every day I'd learn for 30 minutes. Every day I'd message a podcast listener. And that just became kind of my, what we would call a system of success. That was it in the very beginning. It was, okay, what are the 5 most important behaviors? How do I make sure I'm consistent on them? And I did that every single day, 7 days a week. And that became the foundation for all of the habits that we track today. And then eventually it got to the place where I went to Alan and I said, hey man, I can't do this anymore without making money. Like I'm $30,000 in debt at this point. My car's broken down. I can't really get my car fixed. I really need to figure stuff out. And he said, you should start coaching for free. And I said, I think you missed the point. I need to start making money is what I said. And he said, Kev, you've never coached in this way before. And I think you probably need to build belief in yourself as a coach anyway. Offer some free coaching and see what happens. So I offered 5 people. I think it was either 1 month or 2 months of free coaching. I don't remember. It was either 4 weeks or 8 weeks. And I said, I want to beta test what it's like to be a coach. There's no strings attached. You don't have to work with me after. I just want to add value. And all 5 people said yes. I coached them for free. And at the end of the 4 weeks or the 8 weeks, I said, I can't really do this for free anymore. If you'd like to continue, it's $50 a call. No worries if you don't. And everybody said yes. So that was the beginning of that. It was proof of concept. Maybe this is something. Maybe people actually want to go deeper, and maybe I can actually help them go deeper. And that became the crux of how we got to monetize this, and then how we were able to reinvest in the business. And yeah, that was it in the beginning.
Dude, I am like actually blown away. I love this story.
I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah. I still would very much like to understand. It's like, how did you get into the space of hyper consciousness, and like, what does it even look like when you're trying to transfer whatever epiphanies you've had in hyper consciousness to someone else?
Ooh.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. You don't know this at the time, but I feel like I've always tried to be hyper conscious. In the way of, I've always tried to take very, very challenging things to explain and make them super simple so I could understand them. I think that was my initial thought. Because I remember, I think it was like 2014, I did a Facebook Live. Facebook Live wasn't even a thing, but I did a Facebook video and I put it on Facebook. And my thought was, you don't deserve anything you don't work for. I don't think you deserve a better body unless you work for it. I don't think you deserve a higher quality relationship unless you're willing to work for it. And that became one of the things to me that was different than what other people were saying. So I remember thinking, like, this is kind of an outside the box thought. And then I just tried to start asking why. The question that has helped me become more hyperconscious than anything else is just why. Why do I feel the way I feel? And then you sit there and you don't want to answer it, or you say, I don't know. You know, it's under there somewhere. You just got to sit with it long enough. So I'd sit with it and sit with it and sit with it. And then I think eventually I just started to recognize patterns in myself. A lot of the people I worked with, especially early on, were emotionally driven people like me. So I could see very similar patterns in them that I could see in myself. And then it became I had certain things that I could pull from that I used myself that I could then hopefully help them deploy. And I don't know if I have a good answer, because even with relationship stuff, I remember when this was before I started the podcast. I was single, I was heartbroken, and I had a friends with benefits situation going on with someone. And she ended up meeting someone and said, I would like to pursue this relationship. And I said, awesome, you do you. Like, we were genuinely friends. We were really good friends. And she used to message me for relationship advice after. And I remember she asked me one time, she said, how do you know how to give the advice you give? And I said, I don't know. Some of it just makes sense. It's just there. It makes sense. It's easy for me to see the parts and then just give advice because I have nothing to do with it. And all the blind spots that you have are just sitting right in front of me. So that's the best answer I can give is I think I try to study myself as much as humanly possible. And the more I understood about myself, the easier it was to understand other people and what they were going through.
Can you talk to me about some of the larger realizations and epiphanies that you've had that were maybe like turnaround moments for you?
Yeah, I am wildly insecure. Way more insecure than anybody could ever tell because I was always in really good shape and I always exuded confidence that I didn't have. But I was wildly insecure, 1,000%. That was one. Another one for me was my deepest fear, my core wound, something that runs me more than anything else, is the fear of disappointing others, especially men. Because I grew up without a dad. So my fear is not being successful and disappointing people. And when I started to uncover that fear of disappointing people, it really scared me because I'm a business owner who's going to disappoint people. The more clients you get, the higher opportunity there is for disappointment. And it became really, really hard for me probably 6 months ago. I was learning this and I was going through this and I was growing through this, and it was really scaring me because I was thinking to myself, am I really going to be capable of handling all the disappointment that comes with all the success that I'm desiring to have? Because with more success comes more disappointment and more feedback. So that was a really big piece. The fact that I suffer probably an unhealthy amount for the things that I think will be worth it was a scary realization for me. Where I'm pretty good at suffering. Like, even right now, we're going through a lot of stressful stuff in the business, and I don't think it's healthy for me. Physically, mentally, emotionally, I don't think it is healthy for me. But I refuse to tap out. I don't care. I didn't sign up to this to make my life easier. I signed up to this to actually impact. So that was a very scary realization that kind of rocked me, that my life is always going to look different than I ever expected it to. And I don't know if I would ever change that. I appreciate the responsibility. I feel like we're actually capable of impacting people at the rate that we want. I feel called to do that. So it's scary how it went from like a hobby to kind of like a calling to then a responsibility. It's not an option to quit. It's hard to explain. Like, somebody asked me yesterday, why don't you guys ever miss an episode? It's not an option. It's I can't even think of it. It doesn't compute. It just doesn't compute in my brain. It's not an option. That's kind of
Right.
scary, because what does that mean about what happens when I get sick or when I travel or whatever? There's a lot of weight that comes with that.
Yeah, I feel you, man. I feel you. I mean, this insecurity realization that you've had with, especially regards to men,
Mm.
that's a very interesting, observation. It's so tough as well because it's like you're inevitably going to be disappointing somebody at some point,
Mm-hmm.
and coming to terms with that is very scary, especially if you're insecure about that.
I've tried my best to really
Yeah.
lean into depersonalizing it. It's not, Kev, they're not. This happened to me recently. We lost a client. So we had a client, they were with us for a few months, and they ended up leaving.
Mhm.
And I remember thinking to myself, okay, why am I so triggered? Because when I got the email, and the message was wonderful. It wasn't mean. They weren't angry. They weren't upset. It wasn't that. It was, I've really enjoyed our time working together, but I want to test out a new direction. Something like that. And I got triggered, and it just hijacks my day. It's
Right.
really hard for me to stay on track. It takes me off track, and I get all in my emotions. And I said, all right, what's going on here? Then I said, I feel like I disappointed this person. Okay. What does that mean? Well, they're going to look at me differently. Okay. What does that mean? They're not going to believe in me as much. Okay. What does that mean? I'm not going to be as successful as I want to be. Okay. What does that mean? I'm defective. I'm not good enough. When I started to get to that layer and that layer and that layer, it really helped me understand that that's not what's happening. What's happening is something is misaligned and it's not working the way that they want it to, and that's completely fine. And they want to go in a different direction. You don't have to personalize everything. Now, if somebody messaged me and said, Kev, I was really looking forward to this, and what I was promised just wasn't delivered, and this person, let's say hypothetically, they were a really heart-driven, really caring person who I had a really good bond with, that's a time to look at myself and own that and say, you know what, you're right. You're right. I didn't live up to my end of the bargain. For that, I apologize. And I'm sorry I disappointed you, because I disappointed myself. If I disappointed you, I disappointed myself. But that's not always the case. So I'm trying really to do a much better job of sifting through what is the most likely truth here, and how do I
Mm.
not ruminate over something that might not be true at all. Some people kind of just suck, and you're never going to make them happy. Other people, you're always going to make them happy, and they might not tell you when you're not making them happy. And that's not good either, because that's not a good opportunity for growth. Somewhere in
Right.
between, I think, is the right amount of personalization, the right amount of feedback, the right amount of lessons. And honestly, I'm still looking for the right level. I'm closer to center than I've ever been, but I'm still not there, and there's still work to do for sure.
Interesting. What is there for you?
Man, getting to the place where no matter what happens with someone, I can say, do you have any feedback? Like, what is your honest feedback? Even if I know it's going to suck.
Mm-hmm.
That way, at least I have a 360-degree view of what's going on, and then I can choose what I want to be true to me and what lessons I can take from that. I think that's probably the most centered. And when it happens, it doesn't take me completely off track for the day. It used to be, if that happened, it would take me off track for a week.
Mm.
And then it'd probably take me off track for 4 days. And then it was 3 days. Then it was 2 days. And now it's an hour.
Mm.
Getting that hour down to a minute is the ultimate. I think that's the ultimate long-term goal, but not from a place of ego, of, screw them. Screw you. Your opinion doesn't
Right.
matter. That's not centered. That's ego,
Yeah.
and that's protector. Living from a place of authenticity, not from a protector, because that's the only way I'm going to learn from it.
That's fascinating. Yeah, that requires almost complete like depersonalization of the criticism, where you're not like, yeah, maybe your performance wasn't as great as it should have been or whatever, but it doesn't reflect poorly on you as a person at all. And then
Yeah.
that's how you could get to that point where you're hearing that feedback and it's not really affecting you. And it's so cool that you're like getting there. And it's difficult. I feel like we see culturally at large, it's so easy for people to make their opinions almost like a part of their identity. And when that becomes challenged, people fall apart. And it's like we have this like clinginess. Yeah, it's like it's our ego really. And I don't know. It's interesting. It's weird that's kind of like the baseline for people. We should really be teaching like, okay, opinions are opinions, and life is life, and you're beyond whatever people think of you.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I don't know why that's not more progressive.
That's why I stay out of politics. I try to stay out of anything where
Yep.
there's two very clearly defined sides, because anytime there's two very clearly defined sides, it almost feels like you're stuck in your opinion and you refuse to see any merit to the other side. Even if we talk about sports teams, it's like,
Yeah.
I hate your team no matter what. Okay, that there's no
Yeah.
constructiveness that's going to come from that.
Yeah.
It can't happen. So yeah, it's I'm very open to having my opinions of myself change, because I think that for me is growth. My opinions and my reflection and my belief and my competence and all of that stuff has changed over the
Mhm.
last 7 years. Sometimes it goes a little bit over and I'm like, oh, I'm way more capable than I thought. And then I'm not as capable as I thought. Okay, that's a lesson. It's
Mhm.
kind of that. It's just, when you grow as a human being, you get opportunities that you're not ready for yet. Or you get opportunities that you've been ready for, but you didn't believe you were ready for. And then you get new feedback. And that feedback affects your identity. And then that new identity changes what you shoot for. And then it becomes this beautiful cycle. But there has to be some reflection in there for you to sit down and say, what in the hell is happening? Am I confident now? Or am my self-worth changing? Was that my ego? It's just that hyper consciousness. It's like the best thing in the world. It's my favorite thing in the world.
Can you talk to me more about that cycle you just described of like, you get your mindset changes, you get this new opportunity, you take the opportunity, it affects your mindset, and then
Yeah, I
continues.
think it's kind of an internal external chain of events. So I recently got an opportunity to speak in Toronto at Evan Carmichael's mastermind. For those who might not know Evan, he's a big YouTuber and he's very big in the self-improvement space. He's one of the greats.
Yeah, Evan, please come on my
Yeah,
podcast.
yeah. I'm telling you, you got to shoot him a
Yeah.
message. Tell him Kevin sent you, and it was a wonderful interview, Kevin said, and I'm sure, not that I have that much pull, but I'm sure he'd probably come on. So
Yeah,
I got
sure.
the opportunity to speak in Toronto at his mastermind. And this is an opportunity I have wanted for years. But when I got the opportunity, I had a moment where I said, oh, God, I wish I didn't get this opportunity, because I know I have to say yes, and I know it's going to just be so hard
Mm.
internally. So I get this external opportunity. It then creates an opportunity for me to face something internally. Fear of disappointment. That's a big one. Fear of uncertainty. I don't even know what I'm speaking on. I'm doing this all by myself. I'm traveling by myself. This is going to be a whole thing. I'm outside of my comfort zone. It's testing my identity. I do the presentation. It went better than I expected. External result. Then I got an opportunity to do another speech to a bigger audience a couple weeks later. So that external result created another external opportunity. And then I had the whole thing again of, I'm going to get found out. There's even more people this time. This is going to be harder. I'm not going to, what if it doesn't go well? I had to face all of that internal stuff. And then I did the presentation and it went really well. And a bunch of people wanted to do calls with me and we've gotten clients from it. But now it's like, well, what if I underserve those clients? They're going to think I'm a fraud. So it does. It's this external opportunities create internal opportunities for growth. And I think internal opportunities for growth create external opportunities for you to face fears that you don't know if you're ready for. And I think it becomes this beautiful chain of events that really shapes your identity, because then you identify as, I am the type of person who does things that scare me internally and externally. So next time I get an opportunity that scares me, that doesn't mean it's a red light. It just might mean it's a yield sign for me to figure out exactly what I'm feeling, and then I can have a moment of courage and hopefully do the thing that scares me because I know I'll be grateful I did.
I love that so much. Yeah, it's like challenging ourselves on the inside, taking those internal opportunities for growth, and then allowing that feedback loop of just evolving through life. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
Yeah, but it takes practice.
Yeah. It definitely takes practice. And I know for myself too, it's like there is such a beauty of like going on a roll and having the momentum. And, do you have advice for people to get the ball rolling?
Yeah, focus on less stuff, but more important stuff. There are three things, not really, but kind of. There are three things in the business that I am responsible for that I am not allowed to drop the ball on. Everything else doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the beginning, when you're trying to get the ball rolling, you're trying to do everything really, really, really well. In the beginning, you only have to really do like three things really well, and then you can shore things up as you get momentum. That would be the advice I would give. Focus on doing far less, but far better, because you're going to make bigger dents that way. You'll probably learn lessons faster. It's kind of the analogy of imagine spending all your time digging 3 holes versus trying to dig 100 holes in the same amount of time. Those 3 holes are going to be 30 times deeper than the 100. So you're going to get some depth there. You're going to get some proof. So if you're trying to build momentum, I would say really hone in on what are the 3 most valuable uses of your time. And the other stuff, we eliminate, we automate, we delegate, or we procrastinate. We don't do any of the other stuff right now. We do the stuff that's most important in the short run. That would be the advice I would give, because that's really, really, really helped me the most.
Like focusing and doing more important work and focusing on that and making improvements in those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do the most. It's like do the most valuable things. Don't really worry about the supplemental things. The supplemental things are supplemental, but they don't what's a good example? Creatine. I take creatine every day. Awesome. Love creatine. Creatine is a supplement. If I just take creatine and I don't go to the gym, not a lot's going to happen. So the gym is the one of the 3 things that you do. The supplements are stuff that you add on after you get the habit, after you are getting the most bang for your buck out of what you're doing.
How did this opportunity to speak with Evan Carmichael in Toronto, how did that happen? Like Evan's enormous,
Yeah, so this speaks to sometimes anxiety can be productive. Okay? I'll frame it with that. In 2019, we reached out to Evan and we wanted to have him on our podcast. So we sent him a video on Instagram or an audio on Instagram. And at the time, he was doing this giant tour to promote, I think, one of his books. And he was just saying yes to everyone. Anybody who reached out to him, he was doing the podcast. So he sent us a video back I think he was in the airport. And he was like, hey guys, I'd love to come on the Hyperconscious podcast. Thanks for sending me the message. I'll shoot this over to my assistant. We'll get it booked. So we were doing a virtual interview over the phone. And he said, you guys have 20 minutes. Well, 20-minute spot. Let's do this. Let's make it as fire as possible. I prepped for like 2 hours for that 20 minutes. I had a list of questions just in case. You never know. What if it goes a little bit longer? So we're getting into the interview. We do it. We're asking our questions. And we're probably like 18 minutes in. And I'm the host. So I said, Ev, I appreciate the time so much, man. I want to make sure you get to your next meeting on time. Anything you want to leave the listeners with? And he said, no. Let's keep going. So he stayed with us for an hour.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
After that hour, he was impressed with the questions we asked. He liked what we were doing. He liked our show. He invited us to come to Toronto and interview him in person.
Oh, wow.
So we went and interviewed him in person. When we were in person with him, we asked him to speak at one of the events that we were co-hosting. So he came to Florida and spoke at one of the events we were co-hosting. And then we kind of became friends after that. And we would exchange Instagram messages. He would check in. Then earlier this year, I messaged him. And I said, Ev, what is your advice for somebody who's trying to get more speeches? Like, what advice would you give? And he said, however much effort you're putting in, multiply it by 100. And I was like, yeah, that's an Evan Carmichael answer if I've ever heard one. All right, appreciate it. And then he messaged me back a couple weeks later and said, hey, I have a mastermind coming up in person. And I really think if you were to come up and talk about the importance and the strategy of asking deep questions, I feel like that would be a really, really powerful thing. Because I've been on a lot of interviews and you guys are like one of the best podcasts I've ever been on.
Wow.
So I had never done a presentation on what he asked me to do. I had no idea what I was going to speak on. I was like, yeah, I'm in. And I booked my flights. I booked my Airbnb. I didn't want to waste the courage. So that's how it happened. It happened from a podcast episode that we did 4 years ago or 5 years ago. And he was impressed by what we did. And then we've gotten some opportunities because of that.
Dude, I love that, man. I love that happened for you.
Know.
And
you never know, Gabi.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah, you never know. We never know, man. Life is interesting. Yeah, I mean, as we're like closing in though, I'm curious, do you have any tools that you use for yourself and that you help employ for others with regards to developing hyper consciousness? Like, you were mentioning for yourself, you kind of ask yourself a question like, oh, this happened, why is that? And then you kind of go deeper until you uncover it. Like, are you journaling that at the same time, or like do you like certain types of questions, or you could go on?
It's a great question. No, I don't.
Mm.
I don't really journal. I'm not saying whether you're watching or listening, you shouldn't, and it's not valuable. A lot of it's just deep conversations. If you spend enough time with me behind the scenes, I will ask you some weird question, hopefully that you've never been asked before. I was talking to a client today. They WhatsApped me, and I checked in. Hey, how's everything going? And they said, I feel like I have a lot of momentum. I'm doing my best not to scare it away, but I'm also doing my best to make sure I enjoy the process. And I sent a question back. I said, right now, what is the number one most empowering belief that you're dealing with? And what is the number one most disempowering belief you're dealing with? Because the message that they sent me does not give me any of the truth. What are we really dealing with here? I'm glad we have momentum, but there's stuff below the momentum. There always is. I think questions can change your life. So I would say asking why is always something I suggest people do. What's underneath this is a wonderful question. What's underneath this? Mm-hmm. What's underneath? Why don't I want to go hang out with these people? What's underneath this? Oh, every time I do, they make fun of my goals and my dreams. Interesting. Okay, maybe I shouldn't spend time with these people as much. But yeah, those are really... Those, and then there was a time where I was like very into philosophy. So philosophy, I have a philosophy book in the bathroom. Like that's when I'm going to the bathroom. If I don't want to scroll on my phone, I'll read my philosophy book. Do I have any specifics I can give you? No. I just like going through and listening to the way people thought.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah, I watch a lot of weird videos on YouTube, just like really strange. What's a good one? I was watching a video the other day about paradoxes. And it was, I think the paradox was, if the barber in the town cuts every man's hair, does he cut his own hair? Something like that. And it was like this riddle, and I'm probably butchering it, but it made me think. It was like, interesting. I've never thought about something like that from that perspective before. So I think it's really introducing new thoughts that you've never thought of and just seeing what it means to you. And then trying to dig and sit in it and explore. I think that's probably I'm weird. I'm a very weird human that I just like having weird, probably what seems like not valuable conversations, but there's a lot of value buried in that stuff that you can connect to other patterns. So I don't know if I have a good answer for it, honestly.
Yeah, read philosophy, get your mind blown, think of something in a new way. Those are all such beautiful concepts. I think we'd all be better off, in life if we challenge ourselves. And we were talking about that a little earlier with regards to politics or anything really, when it's like two paths and then we just devolve into tribalism, like try and get out of our comfort zone and think about things, not too far. We don't want to cause panic attacks.
Yeah, don't go too far. I think at the end of the day, the truth is like you're not right about anything. Just like I'm not right about anything. I'm more right in some things than I've ever been, but that's the intricacy of learning is the little pieces that you don't know yet.
Interesting.
You
Yeah.
know a lot of stuff, but what do you know about the stuff that you know? That's like the journey. I used to think I knew a lot about confidence, and I didn't. And now I know way more about confidence, but I know way less than I need to, and self-worth and boundaries and triggers. It's just there are so many layers under the layer that we're presented, and it's a really fun experiment to try to get to the bottom layer.
Yeah. Kevin, I love this conversation so much. Thank you for
Of
coming onto my
course.
podcast.
I
Yeah.
knew it was going to be awesome after our pre-call. I was super excited for this. I'm happy to come back in the future. We can talk about weird stuff all you want.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, before I ask you the final question though, is where can people find you?
If you have any questions, comments, concerns, whatever it may be, you can shoot me an email, kevin@nextleveluniverse.com. And our podcast is Next Level University. It's on all the podcast platforms. It's on YouTube. I think as of today, we have 1,774 episodes. So plenty of content to binge if you're ever in the mood.
Awesome. Yeah, obviously we'll throw that all in the description.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Kevin, if there was one thing that everyone in the world was listening to right now, right, that you'd want them to know that you would yell from the rooftops, right, what would that be?
The biggest difference between the person you are and the person you aspire to be are the habits that it would take to get you there. It's not going to happen by luck. It's not just you're not just going to wake up one day being the person that you desire. There's going to be a lot of work and a lot of habits and a lot of intention that goes into that. Most people don't end up the version of them they want to be by accident. And 5 or 10 years from today, your life will be different than it is today. It just will be. It's the law of the universe. The question is it going to be better? Is it going to be worse? Is it going to be better by design? Is it going to be worse by lack of focus? It's going to be different. So at least you know you could have some level of impact on that. And it's your responsibility. If you want a better life, it's your responsibility, and you can do that.
All right, folks, that's it for this episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please remember to like and subscribe and follow. Leave a 5-star review. It really goes a long way to help the podcast, and I'm very curious to hear your thoughts. If you've made it this far, definitely leave a comment, some feedback, something, so that I can understand what you guys feel about this podcast and the direction it's going. Next episode, I have Chaz Volk. Chaz is a really interesting dude. He made the Bad Jew podcast, which is a very funny name, but also just like great marketing. He's a brilliant dude, and it was a very fun conversation. So I'm excited to talk about that one. But now to get into my rant at the end of this podcast, where I could just, talk about my thoughts on this episode and just kind of like where I'm holding and what I'm thinking. I really like doing this podcast, and I think very often when I find myself fantasizing about what I would do differently in life, one of the things I would do is start this podcast much earlier. In some ways it feels that I came too late to the game. Like everyone is starting a podcast, and, I'm a little bit late in the game. But then I just realized that that's probably not true. I'm probably still very early on as far as podcasts go. I don't think that we've hit the peak yet of, the amount of people that are looking for podcasts and the amount of people that want to start a podcast. Like, I think I came probably at a good early time still. And it's just really, what would be different if I started 2 years earlier, right? I think what would be different was that I'd have 2 years more of episodes. And that to me just reminds me that, like, I need to grind and continue to put out. And at the same time, it's so discouraging. I think, like, kind of like Kevin in this episode, he dives himself into the deep end, right? And he finds that there are a lot of things that are very scary when you dive into the deep end. And that had to be managed and dealt with. I can't say that I feel like I've dived into the deep end, but what I can say is that I think there is so much unanticipated work that comes into this journey that I didn't necessarily anticipate and don't really want to put in that kind of effort to grind. Like, I kind of wish there's another podcast that, I won't name a name, but they have put in a lot of money into their podcast to make it, what it is. And that they're spending tons of money on cameras and editors and promotions and, making clips and all that. You know how much freaking manpower that takes just to make a 30-second clip on Instagram, just to find the right clip in your video that is viralable and then also make it like intriguing enough to capture people's attention. At the same time, it's so necessary to really grow your brand these days to have those little 30-second clips. And I've done them, and I don't feel I'm particularly good at making them. Some of them have done really well, some of them not so much. But it just takes so much manpower that I frankly don't have, juggling a full-time job and being a dad. So I don't know. It's something that it's a dream of mine to do, and it's meaning having a successful podcast and being a successful podcaster. It's something that I really want to happen. Ideally, that would be my job full time, but it just is so difficult to get to that point where it can actually be your job full time. Because I think there's almost like an underestimation of how much of an audience you truly need to be making a decent amount of money on this. Like, I think, I don't know the exact number of what you would need to make it full time. I would guess at minimum 100,000 followers to be doing a podcast full time. And that is so rare in a sense. Like, most people that start podcasts probably are never getting to 100,000 followers. But then at the same time, there are so many podcasts with 100,000 plus followers. Like, there are so many freaking podcasts with 100,000 plus followers. And some of them, like, I get so surprised every time that I discover a new podcast with 100,000 or more followers that I'm just like, wow, what the hell? I've never even heard of these people. And to so many people, they're probably famous in their world. So I don't know. It just speaks to the almost infinite level of the of possible successes, but then also yet understanding how hard and difficult it is. And it's like, I kind of want to say never give up, but then at the same time, it's just like, you have to be practical. And it's like, yeah, if I do this as a hobby, I'll probably, continue where I am now, which is posting an episode once a month if I can. But I would like to post an episode weekly and then eventually get to twice a week, right? So I don't know. It's a long rant, just kind of clearing my head and informing my audience about where I am with the podcast and just with my thoughts. And I think I really like this idea of just rambling at the end at the end of any given episode to talk a little bit about what I feel like I learned from this episode and what I feel like I've gained. And what I feel like about Kevin that's so interesting is that he jumped into the deep end. Like, that to me is what kind of blows my mind. Leaving a job of security, which, I mean, he had to, he was miserable. But still, doing that takes so much guts. And it's like, as a therapist, I understand. Like, I work with clients that are in that position, and it's like, they don't take that leap. They find a way to live to make the rat race work, right? To just go by day. And it's like, I don't know, man. What's the right answer? Is the right answer to stay in the security of the rat race, or is the right answer to, to break out of it, right? And I guess everyone has to make that own personal decision for themselves and decide what they think is best and right. There's no one size fits all answer. For some people, escaping the rat race is the right answer. And for some people, it's probably a really bad idea. But either way, hearing Kevin's story was inspiring nonetheless. And, being honest and checking in with oneself is just always really important. And doing that was very valuable. So guys, thanks again for listening to this episode. Be sure to leave your thoughts, and I'll see you in the next one.